On this episode, we discuss our respective trips to Singapore and Canada and our thoughts on missing Thailand.
So if you're like us and enjoy coming back home to Thailand from far afield, you'll dig this episode of the Bangkok podcast.
Sawadee krap, and welcome to the Bangkok podcast. My name is Greg Jorgensen, a Canadian who came to Thailand in 2001, who just returned from a trip back to the motherland. And boy, howdy, did I ever miss Thai food.
I'm sure you did.
Yeah.
And I made canoe with an American who came to Thailand on a one-year teaching contract, really almost 23 years ago. And I fell in love with trying to predict how near or far away we are from the next coup. So I never left.
Do bookies ever take bets on that?
It would be a fascinating thing to do that. It's even though my field that I work in is political science, I can't tell. I can't tell if we're nearer or further away from the next military takeover. Listeners, we're not going to talk about it on this show, but it's just the Thai political scene is just so uncertain. I just feel like no one has any idea what's going on or what's going to happen.
Oh, good times.
All right, we want to give a big thanks to all of our patrons who support the show. Patrons get every episode a day early, behind-the-scenes photos of our interviews, a heads up to send questions to upcoming guests, and access to our Discord server to chat with me, Greg, and other listeners around the world. But best of all, patrons also get an unscripted, uncensored bonus episode every week where we riff on current events and Bangkok topics. On this week's bonus show, we chatted about a brand new fire in our bellies to learn Thai, a proposed bridge from the mainland to Koh Samui, some updates on the shit show that is Twitter, and more updates on the Machiavellian/shit show drama that is Thai politics. To learn how to become a patron, click the support button at the top of our website.
Yeah, and as always, if you have a comment, show idea, or just want to say hi, head to bangkokpodcast.com and click the little microphone button on the bottom right to leave us a voicemail that we'll play on the show. Alrighty then, on this episode, Ed and I are both back to Thailand after our respective trips, Ed to Singapore and myself to Canada. I think anyone can agree that the occasional palate cleanser is a good thing no matter where you live, and getting out of your home country to refresh and reorient yourself is always a good way to get a good frame of reference and see things in a slightly different light when you get back home, in this case, Thailand. So we thought it'd be fun to discuss our trips, a few takeaways, and how we feel about coming back to Thailand. So Ed, you went to Singapore. You and I haven't really chatted since I've gotten back, since you've gotten back, so I don't really know how the trip was.
Not too much. My trip went fine. I think I mentioned it before we kind of took our break. I just went on a school trip. It's really a field trip for incoming freshmen in my faculty. And it's the first time we've done it, I think. Maybe we did it a really long time ago, but I have no memory of it. And it's just kind of a fun thing for the freshmen before they start class, because we start class next week. And so the idea is, take them to Singapore for basically 3.5 days. And they get to meet each other and do kind of tour. We're all tourists there. So we didn't really do academic stuff. Like, this is supposed to be a fun thing for them to get to know each other. And technically I was a chaperone, but it turns out the tour company took care of most of the difficult work, like head counts and things like that.
Nice.
So I didn't have much to do except take pictures of the new kids and meet the students and walk around Singapore. So it went well. The weather was good. It didn't rain much, but man, I really felt the being closer to the equator thing, because I really, when I come back from the States and get off the plane here, and I step into the Thai air, it's so thick.
Yes, right.
It's so thick. But man, at least when I went to Singapore, presumably maybe time of the year is a factor as well. It was just a notch up humidity wise. I was really feeling it, and I was joking with my students about it. I thought Thailand was humid.
That's right.
It was thick, man.
It's
sticky. it's just heavy. There was just like this heavy. I mean, it was very hot when I was there, but it was hot when I left Thailand. But I don't know what the humidity was. Just I don't know. Maybe here it's 80%, and in Singapore it's 90%. So I was feeling it. And I mean, as you know, when you have one of those busy vacations and you're doing a whole bunch of stuff that tourists do, it's actually fairly stressful. It's not very relaxing. And, you're rushing here, rushing there. And we one day we went to Universal Studios, and, it's an amusement park, a crowded amusement park. So you can imagine just the heat and the stress and the crowds. I was basically, when I was at Universal Studios, I was mostly just wandering around taking pictures of students. But I was so hot and it was so humid that I considered any place that had air conditioning to be kind of an island.
Right.
So I would be in Starbucks, and then I'd be like, oh, there's an ice cream shop. So 20 minutes later, I'm sitting in an ice cream shop, and then I would venture out into the dense fog, right? And then there would be like, oh, a pizza shop. I'm going to go sit there. I bumped into a group of students, and they're like, Janad, where are you going? And I said, oh, I'm going from aircon to aircon. Like they're islands. Like they are mirages in the desert. And they were really confused, they're just looking at me like, what are you talking about? And then I just said, I'm old. and they were like, oh shit. Yes. Oh, sorry. We didn't think about, like, we weren't even thinking about that.
That's funny. I heard an anecdote, and it wouldn't surprise me if it's true. I don't know if it is or not, but I heard in the early days when Singapore was undergoing its great transformation from like this swampy island into a first world paradise, that Lee Kuan Yew, the first thing he did was air conditioned all the bureaucratic offices, all the government offices. Because he knew that if all the pencil pushers and geeks and all the people that were responsible for getting the gears of the economy moving, he knew that if they were comfortable, then they would work much more efficiently and much faster. And that's what he did.
Genius. No, it's a great idea. I mean, I felt it. I mean, I usually feel it when I come back here from the West, but this was another level up. But I've got insights. I've got things to say. I don't know if you want to start with your talking about some insights. In a way, it's funny. You would think that the contrast between Canada and Thailand is greater than Thailand and Singapore, but not necessarily, because Singapore is, it is, like you said, it is kind of this first world paradise. So we both went from, I don't think Thailand is third world, but to me, Thailand is probably second world, or whatever you want to call it.
You never hear that, do you? You never hear second world.
Yeah, you're right. So it's kind of developing. I wouldn't say it's undeveloped. But in a way, we both went to the first world.
Yeah. So what differences did you notice in Singapore right away?
Well, I mean, besides
the weather.
The one thing, the cliche was true. I mean, I've been there before. I've been there several times, but it's been a while. I think it's been 6 or 7 years since I've been there. But yeah, it's just so clean and orderly. Like, so that was the first thing I noticed, because I was thinking about it. I'm like, okay, is it really as clean and orderly and organized as I remember it, and that's supposed to be? And then the answer was basically yes. And I noticed it. I noticed it in many things, but in particular the traffic and the way all the automobiles, and they don't have nowhere near as many motorbikes, and all the pedestrians, everyone followed the rules. Yeah, and that was when I got off the bus, and we got to the hotel, and we had to cross over the street. It was just so orderly, and this is the general public. I'm looking at people crossing the street and waiting at crosswalks, and the immediate impression is that this is not the same. This is orderly, and everyone is following the rules. That's like what I mean. Right. There's no motorbikes on the sidewalk. There's nothing like that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's no one taking shortcuts to benefit themselves. That's right. It seems like a group think, and that may or may not be a good thing, but it definitely makes things more orderly and easier to predict.
Yeah. So my first impression was nothing unique. Like, it was just what most people think, so in that respect, Singapore fit the cliche. I have some other things where at least they didn't fit the cliche that I thought they would, but that would be my first impression. Humid and clean and orderly.
What kind of things didn't fit the cliche?
You sure you want me to go there right away? You
I
want me to
do.
go right there? Okay, all right. I'll go there. So Singapore has this reputation for being conservative and kind of authoritarian. They're not really a democracy. It's kind of one family's been running the country, forever, and you think of it as conservative. But here's an interesting thing: they are, I would say, authoritarian in the extent that it's very orderly. So it's definitely kind of a rule of law place. Mm-hmm. But I realized after being there a couple of days, it's not really conservative. The women, I saw women dressed there in way more scantily clad than in Thailand, like way more. I was actually a little bit shocked. Like I wasn't even sure if it would fly in the States. Like some girls were basically wearing like Calvin Klein underwear. Was that, I was walking behind this girl in the mall and I was just like, that's underwear. Like she's wearing underwear. Yeah. And no Thai girl would ever do that. And then there were you're just in the mall and then it'll just say like adult shop, like a sex shop. And I was just like, oh shit, I thought this is Singapore. Like what's up with that? And then I was walking around near my hotel and there was like another one, like right on the street.
Dildos are us. It's
kind of more or less. And it was a little bit, to me, it just, what popped into my head is, well, in Bangkok, it's massage parlors, so it's like, you walk out of your hotel and of course there's going to be a massage parlor like right next to your hotel. And
right. And just like toys. What about the real deal?
Yeah. Yeah, really. We got the real deal. And then of course there's just tons of bars. I was, I guess I was maybe I was near the nightlife area. I'm not sure, but there was just bars everywhere, bars and restaurants, and just walls of booze and drinks. And now I didn't stay out late. I was there on a work trip. So I'm not saying it was wild, but it's not really socially conservative. I would say it's authoritarian, but it's not socially conservative. It's not socially conservative. I mean, obviously no drugs. I was very careful before I left Bangkok to just make sure I didn't have one like cannabis seed anywhere, in a pocket or in my shoe,
right?
Or just accidentally in my bag. I was very certain of that.
like a sesame seed sized thing in the sole of your shoe or something that you stepped on the way.
Story of my life. So I'm not saying this is a liberal place. It is authoritarian, but it's in a way it's more westernized in that this is, we're in Asia, but Singapore is famously mixed. This is kind of like it's one of the few places along with the United States that's kind of defined itself as being diverse. Like that most countries are the absolute opposite, but they have a Malay or Indonesian population. They have a Chinese population. They have an Indian population. They've got obviously Brits. So you get this vibe of it's like New York with Asians, more Asians. Obviously, there's already a lot of Asians in New York, but it's like it's just hyper developed, but it's not like being in Tokyo. Tokyo still feels like, okay, this is Asia. Like there's no girls walking around with like Yves Saint Laurent like underwear. Like so this is more this had to me it's more like New York or LA. It's just with instead of 20% Asians, it's 90% Asians.
Right, I see. I can see that. That makes sense. I got a very distinct like North American vibe from it when I was there. Except
to me it's very Western. It's very Western.
The restaurants and the language, it's clearly very Asian, but architecturally and in terms of the skyline and the way things operate, it's very North American.
Yeah, it's very Westernized, no doubt.
Yeah. Well, that sounds like a good trip. Did you go on the roller coaster, the Battlestar Galactica roller coaster at Universal Studios?
I rode no roller coasters, but I did take a picture of that one because I was one of the quirks of being at Universal Studios. I'm a movie guy. I teach a film class, and you go to Universal Studios in Singapore, and I would say, 90 to 95% of every movie reference is post 2000. So I thought it was going to be all this film lore and all this like Jaws memorabilia and stuff like that. But it's not like that. It's all like Minions and Shrek.
Right.
And
You're not going to go on like the Cannonball Run ride or something.
That's right. That's right. It's that. Yeah. So there were scant tidbits of people for older people. So one of them was a Battlestar Galactica TV show, which was I think 77 or 78, something like that. So there's a Battlestar Galactica, and I had to explain to my students even though there was a newer series which you and I watched, right. But my students never had no idea what Battlestar Galactica was. They did know Jurassic Park. So I guess Jurassic Park is somewhat retro now for young people.
I guess that was 30 years ago.
Yeah, my students
just had his 30th anniversary actually.
Yeah, so my students knew Jurassic Park. But there's not a lot of old stuff. So I was happy that they have a Mel's Drive-In kind of diner. Uh-huh. And Mel's Drive-In is a real diner. And I think it's in maybe both LA and San Francisco. Because I remember going to a real one when I lived in LA. And it's been in a bunch of movies, but I think it's most famous for American Graffiti. But it's super American, iconic. As soon as you see it, you're like, oh yeah, I know that.
Right.
So I was happy to have seen that, and I mean there were a few other things. They have a old town, which is supposed to be like a movie set, and then if you look at the bars or restaurants or shops, they tend to make movie references. So there was a Quince tackle shop.
Okay.
Quince bait and tackle, and I'm like, yeah, I get that. It's like, but there weren't most things were just for kids, or they were like in the last 10 or 15 years.
Right. Yeah.
It was like Transformers and, so I felt that damn place made me feel old.
Well, that and the skipping between the islands of air conditioning.
Well, yeah. Well, I was old, and that required treating air conditioning like oases. But yeah, no, I had fun. But my movie knowledge seems to be skewed towards the 70s and 80s. I'm not sure why.
All right. Mystery. It's a mystery. It's interesting. I took some notes when I was in Canada too, and actually a couple of them overlap with what you said too. But remember how I was worried about getting my son out of the country as a single parent with him. And so I had to prepare all these documents and things, permission forms from my wife, his birth certificate and everything like that. And it turns out I needed them. I was asked at the immigration desk, the guy looked at me and he looked at him and he said, "Is that your son?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Where's the wife, the mother?" And I said, "Oh, she's not coming." And he goes,
okay, that might be a problem.
That's when I pulled out the folder. I was like, I have his birth certificate here, which has my name on it. And I have, a letter from the mom and the copy of thing. And he looked them all over and he said, "Okay, great." And that was it. So no big deal.
Did you have to tell him to ignore the chain you had around his neck and around your wrist? Like, did you have that hidden like under a sweater, or did you tell him about it?
Tell him I'm your father. Remember, just like we rehearsed. No, so we did need the paperwork, but there was no big deal. I will say, however, that I did not need, and was not asked for the international driver's permit that I spent so much time getting. So,
but did you ever? So you have a Thai driver's license, right?
Yeah.
But you were never asked for that either. So it's kind of, you were just driving as if you were driving illegally. It wouldn't have mattered, right?
No. They asked me for my Thai driver's license when I showed up to the car rental place.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
I said, "You need my IDP?" And they said, "No, just your Thai one is fine."
Interesting.
Right.
Oh, cool.
All that stress for nothing.
Cool.
Another thing I was worried about when I went back was tipping, because I don't know about you, but I've read a lot of stories over the recent months about how tipping culture has gotten out of control in North America. And a lot of restaurants sort of automatically assume you're going to give you an option to pay like at least 15%, goes up to 35% or something like that.
Oh, shit.
So I was a little bit nervous about that. It only happened a couple of times, and it turns out I've got no problem with pressing 3 extra buttons to get to the 0 tip screen. So,
Right.
I don't think it's a good idea. Like if you go to like McDonald's or something and it says tip, like I'm not giving you a tip for standing at the counter and pressing.
Agreed.
But if you go to a sit down restaurant, okay, I tipped a little bit there.
Well,
So
you and I have talked about tipping before. I'm too lazy to figure out the right amount to tip. So, I'm an American and I grew up paying 10 to 15%. So even in Thailand, I tend to give 10 to 15%, even though it's not necessary.
right.
But that's what I want to give. So I don't want them to boost it up to 30. And I hate when one thing that I found on this trip is that I realized I had to check the bill to see if it was already included. And so because I definitely don't want to double tip. So for me, whatever, I just grew up paying 10 to 15. And if I'm on the moon, I'm going to pay 10 to 15. I don't care. That's what I'm doing. I'm not paying 30. I feel bad paying nothing. Like I just, even if I'm in a place where it's not required. So I just kind of do my thing.
Well, one thing that I also noticed in what you talked about was a lot of the women were wearing really like shockingly skimpy clothes.
That's right. No, our standards have changed. We're used to, Thai women in public, or just Thai people in general, are modest in public. And I think we've gotten used to it. And so here I am in quote unquote conservative Singapore, and I was like, oh my God, no Thai girl would dress this way.
And we're not prudes. I also think that
not.
everyone should wear what they want, and everyone should be comfortable in their own skin. That's great. That's great.
Sure.
But there was many times where, I mean, a woman would walk by in like super tight yoga shorts.
Yep.
A sports bra.
Yep. Exactly.
Like, wow, you just don't see that in Thailand.
For sure. Same thing. Yeah. Hey, I want to ask you this. So you were in Calgary, Vancouver. So
no, I was only in Victoria and Vancouver.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, so obviously I grew up in the States, but I grew up in Cleveland, which is not the most advanced part of the U.S. We've got a horribly like shitty kind of one-line subway, but it is still a modern city, but it's not the cutting edge of the United States.
Right.
And so when I went to Japan for the first time, it was the first time I'd ever been somewhere where the technology was just clearly superior. So whether it was the toilets that everyone talks about, or I think I told my story before about getting off a plane in Osaka, and I had a luggage carrier that I was able to walk to the train station to go to Kyoto, and I was looking for where to put the luggage carrier, and they're like, no, you could just take it right on the train. And I took it on the train, and it slotted into a position. So
amazing.
The luggage carrier from the airport.
Amazing.
It fits in the train going to Kyoto. Wow. And so, I mean, I guess that's not really advanced technology. It's more like they just have their shit together.
It's just urban design.
It's just everything works. You're just like, everything is planned and works, and clicks and everything works. And I did get this vibe from Singapore. Now, the exception was we stayed in a perfectly fine hotel, but clearly it was in its heyday, like in the 1960s. So, it's one of these old vintage places. And man, the room had some retro technology. I the buttons, like they haven't upgraded. It's just all the buttons, all the switches. And I was just
big Zenith television in the corner.
Seriously, that's how the hotel was. I mean, it was perfectly clean. It's almost like they decided, okay, we're not upgrading shit. We're just keeping everything the same. But in one, of course, I stayed on Orchard Street. And just mall after mall after mall, restaurant after restaurant. And this is the first time it hasn't happened in Bangkok. I went into the restaurant and they have no cashier. So you sit down at the table and a woman walks up and says, she just basically points, like, scan this QR thing. So you scan the QR and that's the menu, and that's how you order, and that's how you pay. So you can't pay in cash. And then essentially there's no wait staff. I mean, obviously they bring the food to your table after you order it, but there's no communicating with them. So it was the first. I've not done that. I'm sure that I'm guessing it probably exists in Bangkok, but first time I've ever experienced that. So it's like there are people who cook and there's people who bring you the food. And I guess there's technically somebody who's a waitress, but it's more like a greet her.
It's more like a service or a customer support. Like, hey, there's a problem. Oh, I'll help you.
Yeah. So I'm sure if everything worked fine, but if there's a problem, I'm sure they would have. So I just felt like, okay, wow, this is another level. So no cashier. So everything is done electronically. You pay online. There's no cash changing hands, and there's it was convenient. but in a way, I kind of missed interacting with staff. It's like it's almost like, I don't know. It was weird. It's like the wait. I'm sure I could have called someone over and asked them some questions.
Yeah.
But there's no waitress or waiter standing there, to talk to about the menu. You're just on your phone.
Right. Well, yeah, it's similar in Canada. Things aren't planned to that degree, but I did notice that a lot of places, you brought this up. I've forgotten to bring this up, but a lot of places had signs that said no cash. They're tap only. Sure. Credit cards or debit cards or whatever they use in Canada. I was doing most of the trip. I decided to use my credit card with the chip in it so I could just tap. But it was shocking to me that a lot of places are just like, we just don't take cash anymore. Just
That's right.
Card only.
I have encountered that here in Bangkok, but more in Singapore for sure.
Yeah.
It's just, I feel like cash is on its way out. And I know there's people who are sounding the alarm about it. I don't know if, I wonder if I should be more worried about it. It is a little bit weird. It's just weird that it's one thing to tell people you can pay digitally. It's another thing to tell people you can't use cash. Like, we're not going to accept it. You're like, wait, this is money.
Yeah.
This is the official, this is the legal tender.
Doesn't that mean legal tender? Doesn't that mean that like you have to take this?
Yeah. And I think there are, so there's kind of
with a hot dog vendor.
Yeah. I mean, there's like a kind of a loosely, I would say, conservative opposition to digital money. And I think there's I think there might be some states in the US, conservative states, that have basically told restaurants you must accept cash. And I kind of agree with that. I would like the option,
It's like the baseline. Like, the baseline is cash, and if 99% of the customers want to go digital, that's fine, but they should always have that baseline there.
Yeah, I guess I got a little bit of conservative in me.
Ooh. Well, speaking of skimpy clothes, one thing I also noticed too, and this does make me wonder if I'm actually becoming the old man shaking his fist at a cloud, is a lot of people have tattoos. And I gotta say, man, I am not a fan. I was surprised at how I was at almost all of them. Yeah. And as a guy who wants to get a tattoo, I'm now seriously reconsidering it. Like, you
want to get a tattoo of what? Indiana Jones?
You and me and the Bangkok podcast logo. No, okay, I've got an idea for a cool, meaningful tattoo that I think means a lot to me that I'm going to do. But and I just want to get it on my arm, my bicep, the cheesy location. But so many people, women especially, because a lot of them were wearing skimpy clothes, had upper thigh tattoos or tattoos like on their butt cheek or calf.
Are you sure you're not confusing your Canada trip with your Nana Plaza trip? Are you mixing them together? Are you mixing them together?
Definitely not. But man, I was just surprised at how gross they all looked and how turned off I was. I just thought they looked all trashy.
Interesting. I did not notice or remember noticing a lot of tattoos in Singapore, so maybe it is conservative in that way. In general, I like tattoos. I think they're cool, but I'm definitely a wuss. Like, I wouldn't get one just because of they're permanent, even though I know that's part of the culture. Like, tattoos are supposed to be this commitment.
Yeah. Right.
But honestly, God, I can't. I guess maybe we haven't talked about this on the show, but man, I tattoos that you could wash off or keep for a year, I think that would be the best.
That'd be awesome.
The best compromise. If you could just get a proper tattoo that would look real, but then maybe after a year you like ate a pill and then it dissolved. That you can make $1 billion with.
Did you ever hear that story about the guy who went on a trip and he came back and he had like a whale tattoo on his shoulder or something? And his friends were like, "Why'd you get a whale tattoo?" And he said, "Well, I didn't have what I wanted." Just don't get the tattoo anyway.
Yeah.
And man, I asked my son what he liked most about being in Canada, and he said, without a doubt, the weather. And it was about 22, 24 degrees every day.
What is that in English? What is that in English?
You mean American? Let me just ask Google. That's 72 degrees, 71 degrees.
72 degrees. I think that is the official best climate. I think based on surveys, it's like something like 72 it's the temperature that everyone agrees is the best.
Humans are so fragile, aren't we? We're so pathetic. Like, yeah, we only
Yep.
really like it 10 degrees either way.
That's right. Yeah, sure.
But, you know, in Bangkok or when you're on the go to the islands, when you go down to the coast or something like that, you get the breeze and it's lovely, but it's a warm breeze. But
Yes.
in Vancouver, it's the breeze is off the ocean and it's got that little bit of a bite to it, that little bit of a chill, just enough that some days we put on a light hoodie. And God, I miss that, man. It was so nice.
Natural air conditioning.
Yeah, it was so nice. And the weather was beautiful and everyone was riding bikes. Not only were they just riding bikes, they had like there's so many of these family bikes where like the mom or the dad sits on the back and then up front you've got like a little wheelbarrow for the kids to sit in.
Oh, wow.
Or carry groceries or whatever. There's tons of those everywhere. So just, man, that outdoor, easily accessible outdoor lifestyle, I really miss that.
I feel like Vancouver just has that image of being athletic and mountain climbing and hiking and the water sports, and it's just got that perfectly. Yeah.
And the last thing I will talk about the notes I took when I was there was that I'm going to try and start bringing this back to Thailand. This is my mission now over the next couple of years. And I don't know if you do this in the States, but in Canada, whenever we pull in front of someone in a car or someone lets us in, we always give them the friendly wave, the 2-finger wave through the back window. Do you do that?
Two finger wave? No.
It could be the whole hand, could be the 2 fingers, whatever, but it's a wave.
Okay, sure. Yeah, I understand. Some acknowledgement. Sure.
Yeah, like thanks for letting me in.
Yeah.
I never see that in Bangkok. I'm going to start doing it. I'm going to see if I can bring it back.
But Thai people usually smile though. Like Thai people are not clueless. They definitely recognize you. They definitely recognize you.
Well, they made the motorcycles do the magic head nod. You know, they just sort of bob their head up and down like thank you.
Yeah. So you want to try to bring the 2-finger wave to Thailand.
I'll try. I'll do just the full hand. 2-finger someone might misconstrue that for something weird, but I'll just do the full hand. But whenever someone lets me in or stops to slow down so I can get ahead of them or something like that, I'm just going to wave in the back window, see if it spreads.
All right, I'll support that. I'll try to do it myself.
I think it's a friendly little thing. Let's make everyone a little bit happier. Why not?
Agreed. Hey, I've got 2 more quick takes on Singapore. One of them is kind of obvious, but one of them is weird, but I'm going to throw it out there anyway. Right. I knew that Singapore would be somewhat more expensive, especially because I was staying on Orchard Street. But it was actually a lot more expensive, and I was a little bit confused. I haven't had time to figure it out. But for example, I went to an Indian restaurant one night and got my typical Indian thing that I get in Bangkok all the time. Normally in Bangkok, especially on Sukhumvit, it might be 400 or 450 baht, which is a little bit expensive for a Bangkok dinner. I mean, that's like a night out. That's a night out. And I was in a virtually identical place, granted on Orchard Street, but it wasn't some super fancy place. Like this just looked like a family-run place, and with one beer, it was the equivalent of 1,700 baht.
Wow!
It was basically triple. I mean, I'm talking for aloo gobi here. You know,
I love aloo gobi.
And Tiger beer. You know, which is a Singaporean beer, but it was 1,700 baht, and this is not a fancy place. And I noticed that even in 7-Eleven when I was trying to buy some beers, it was just a lot more expensive. And I thought it would be more expensive, maybe 20-30%, but the food and beverages were at least double. So whatever, I'm going to throw that out there. So listeners who are more travelers than I am, if you could explain that, I was a little bit shocked. I'm telling you, the Indian food was 3 times more.
Wow.
3 times more.
Aloo gobi is pretty good.
Okay. Now, my last observation, I know this is going to come across as weird, but I'm going to throw out there anyway, just because I was so amazed by this, I was almost embarrassed. So, I was walking around with my students, and they were, they're queens of Instagram. So these are like 18-year-old Thai girls. So they're always taking pictures of each other. And, I was joking with one girl. I asked her how many times have you had your picture taken in the last 3 days? And she said, "Oh, Achan, like over 1,000 for sure." And I'm sure she's right. 1,000 times she had her picture taken. But here's the weird thing: walking around Singapore, and we're going to these Instagrammable places and stuff. I'm just going to say this. Okay, I'm just going to say it. I'm going to throw it out there. There were Arab and Indian-looking dudes who were really into getting their picture taken, and they were very slick and well dressed. And I'm not implying anything about whether they were straight or gay. Maybe some of them were gay, but I think these were more like player types. These were like good-looking guys, but they were, we were at some Instagramming places, so we're kind of in a queue.
Yeah.
And in the queue, there'd be families, girls, and then 2 Arab guys.
Were they holding hands? Because that's totally
No.
fine in most Arab countries.
No. I mean, again, my point has nothing to do with their sexual orientation. It's just there were like these, and these guys were good looking, like well dressed, just like handsome dudes, and they were doing the Instagram thing, just like my students. And I'm just like, I don't remember ever seeing that in Bangkok. I mean, okay, whatever. And I saw it in multiple places.
Hey man, if you feel pretty, get your photo taken. I don't care.
Do you remember ever seeing that in Bangkok? Like slick looking Arab dudes, like photographing themselves,
No,
like for Instagram.
No, not really. Usually
Isn't
it's
that
just
wild?
Thai women. I have seen a lot of photos online of from Dubai clubs about these dudes who have these insanely coiffed beards and these perfectly sculpted cheekbones and the shirts that are just a bit too tight.
Yeah, this like tight, open. Yeah, these guys are like they're slick, they're good looking guys, but just the way that they're just so into having their picture taken, or just, I don't know, it's random. I'm just trying to keep it real. Just a random observation.
Maybe if you and I were as pretty as those guys are, we'd have our pictures taken all the time too.
For real. No, I was I was jealous to be frank.
Oh, and before we go, I should also say we had a really great lunch with our friend Pai Lin from Hot Thai Kitchen. She's been on the show a few times, and it was really, really cool to meet her in person, which was a very fun morning. Great food, and she bought us ice cream, which my son really loved. So, yeah, it was a really nice end to a great trip.
Yeah, that sounds cool. I'd like to meet her when she gets to Bangkok.
Well, yeah, some good takeaways there, I think. It's really good to travel, man. I think we travel a lot in Thailand. I think we get out and see some stuff here and there, but getting out into different cultures, even back home or
For sure.
or for something familiar or something unfamiliar, there's really no substitute for it. You got to do it.
Agreed.
Just helps you appreciate where you came from and also where we live a bit more. So I love being back in Canada. I really enjoyed it. My son really enjoyed it, but it's nice to be home. It's nice to have the structure of my life that I have built here. It's nice to be back.
Sure. They say travel broadens the mind, and I have to agree. Just every time I travel, I think, wow, I should do this more.
Yeah.
I never travel and say, this was a horrible idea. I should have stayed at home.
Right. I feel like that every time I do sit-ups. I got to do that more often. I feel good. All right. Well, we ask our listeners to send a voicemail using the little microphone button on our website if they have something to say. And this week we heard from our pal Kelly Aronson, and she has some questions for us. So let's see what she had to say.
Hi, Greg and Ed. This is Kelly from the United States, and I have been a subscriber to your podcast since about the beginning of the year as I prepare for a visit to Bangkok for a few weeks this winter. I have a few requests for you based on some of the things I've heard in your episodes. First, I'm interested in paying a visit to Thonburi, and I wonder if you could say some specific spots, like say your top spots that someone might visit who wanted to come to Thonburi for an afternoon or an evening or half a day. What intersections, what say restaurants or areas specifically would you recommend? It seems like a bit of a big place when I look at it on the map. Secondly, I'm wondering also if you could recommend any, maybe say 2 or 3 websites or blogs or news outlets or something where I might read about short articles on news and culture and just perhaps even silly things going on in Bangkok. So, for instance, the Burger King literal cheeseburger, just some things I might be able to read just to stay up to speed on what's going on in Bangkok before I come. All right. I like your podcast a lot. Thanks, you guys. Bye.
Well, it's a good question, Ed, because obviously you and I are the Thonburi kings. We are the Thonburi experts. We both live in Thonburi. So it sounds like she wants to explore the cool side of the river, which is great. Good for you, Kelly. So, I mean, Thonburi top spots, like places you must visit. I can think of a couple. I would say one of the favorites that I always tell my friends who are visiting to go to is Wat Pak Nam Pasicharan, which is also known as the one with the giant Buddha.
The big Buddha, sure.
Big Buddha, and is also where our friend Prat Pandit lives at his temple. That's his temple.
Sure.
Yeah, well worth a visit there. That's really cool. I feel kind of bad saying this, but it's kind of a cheesy thing. But Icon Siam,
Sure.
it's a hell of a mall. It's beautiful. It's luxurious.
It's worth checking out. It's worth checking out. As we said before, it's not a Western mall. It's very Asian. And I think I heard that we are in Asia, so that's appropriate.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. It's cheesy to suggest it, but it's definitely worth seeing. For places to eat, I mean, we could probably go through and name a few, but if you go to season 6, episode 42 of the show you're listening to now, we have our friend on Gary Butler, who talks about his favorite places to eat. He's got a well-known YouTube channel that goes all over the place looking at Thai food. So check that out. She'll show you where to eat in Thonburi. That's worth checking out as well. And finally, from Icon Siam, if you sort of walk north-ish along the river, there's some really, really interesting stuff to see in there. Get lost, follow some bike trails, follow some little sois and klongs. You'll always find some cool architecture and stuff.
There's a couple good bars over there and restaurants.
Yeah, definitely. The Princess Mother Park is also really nice to look at. That's a beautiful little sort of museum park thing in the sort of behind the river area in Thonburi. And also, if you want to get a little bit further back away from the river, check out Poomjai Garden, which is a really beautiful sort of oasis where they serve really good coffee and desserts and stuff like that. It's right on a klong. So that's really fun to check out too. So those are my suggestions.
I second those for sure.
Yeah. And as for your question about where to read about cool trends and stuff in Bangkok, I can only really think about 2 really good things. BK Magazine online.
Sure.
And Coconuts. Really.
Yeah, agreed. And then, of course, Twitter/X. If you just spend some time on there trying to figure out active expats on Twitter/X, they tend to talk about what's happening, the hippest places to go, or new places.
Yeah, that's really good too. You got to put a bit of time into finding the right people. And yeah, well, I'm not on there anymore. As I said, I've ditched that place now, but if you might be able to find some good info on there as well. Anyway, we hope you have a good trip, Kelly. Thanks for the email, and let us know if you have any more questions.
Absolutely. A final thanks to all of our patrons who support the show. Patrons get a ton of cool perks and the warm, fuzzy feeling knowing that they're helping in our never-ending quest for cool content. Find out more by clicking support on our website. And connect with us online. We're Bangkok Podcast on social media, bangkokpodcast.com on the web, or simply bangkokpodcast@gmail.com. We love hearing from our listeners and always reply to our messages.
That's right. You can also listen to each episode on YouTube. You can send us a voicemail through our website like Kelly that will feature on our show. I'm off Twitter, like I said, but you can now find me at BKK Greg on Threads. Thank you for listening, everyone. I'll see you back here next week.
No doubt.
Yeah, same. I think a lot of it comes with AIDS.
Really? Wow.